Last Sunday, I was with our 5th, 6th, and 7th graders in the family faith formation, and one of them asked, "Who made God?" Who made God? It's an excellent question, a really important question. We know that generally all things are made by something or someone. Everything comes from something, from people to furniture to solar systems. None of those things just sort of came into existence. They all had a cause. So what was the cause of God? Who made God? At some point there has to be this being who's always existed. Otherwise, if you keep going like this, cause this, cause this, cause this, cause this, including God, and you just sort of keep on going, it just never ends. But then to say that this whole unlimited, infinite chain of regressive causes has an end, or a beginning, as the case may be, a certain point, well, then that's not infinite, because infinite's the exact opposite of a determined point. And so it's logically impossible, like a one-ended stick or a married bachelor. And so there has to be a being who brings other things into existence, but himself has not been created from some other reality, or else the chain just keeps on going. And that is God. Even the old Greek philosopher Aristotle, he reasoned this out. He lived, of course, before Christ, wasn't part of the people of Israel, so not of a Judeo-Christian background, faith, revelation at all, but he reasoned that this being has to exist. What we hear in the beginning of John's Gospel, John chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and all things came to being through him, and without him nothing came to be. It's the same idea. And of course today we hear God declare his name to Moses, "I am who am." My name is I am. Being itself. Existence is God's very essence. So God is not just one being among many, or even the greatest possible being among all other beings, but is being itself. So there's this mystery, and we'll maybe sort it out completely in heaven, that God is this ultimate, transcendent, high above being. But yet this transcendent God, who is existence itself, also draws close. He also draws close. We see that today. That he appeared to Moses in this bush that was on fire but not burning up. Of course, if you remember from last week, we had our passage about Abraham and the covenant where God appears as this flaming torch, remember, and he passes through the sacrificial offerings to ratify this covenant, this all-in relationship. God appears again in flame today, a sight that draws Moses close. And then God also knows his name, Moses. I like how Gary did that. It's kind of like, what was that, the movie 10 Commandments? Moses. Who knows if it sounded like that or not. And he says, "I am the God of your fathers, of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob." So Moses can be like, he knows my people. Like he was friends with my ancestors. This God of the covenant. This God who also then revealed his name. I am. What's the first thing when we are in a relationship with someone? We get their name. So this transcendent God shows he wants to be in relationship with us and to be close. And this God whose infinite being and existence, he also knows our plight. He says, "I've heard the cry of my people. I've witnessed their sufferings." Again, remember first reading from last week, God told Abraham he's going to have these countless descendants, and he's going to bring them into this land flowing of milk and honey, this promised land, which happened, but then they ended up in Egypt enslaved for over 400 years. But God is so close that he has compassion on his people. He has a heart for them. And he's come to bring deliverance and freedom, salvation. And the same for us. But this freedom, this deliverance, this salvation, we're meant to receive and embrace and to have it transform us in our lives. St. Paul, in our second reading, he reminds the Corinthians of all the amazing signs and wonders that the people of Israel experienced. He goes, they passed through the Red Sea. They ate manna from heaven. They drank water from a rock. But yet their minds and hearts were still far from God. They forgot. They rebelled. They sought after other things. So they didn't bear the fruit of righteousness, of holiness, of a relationship with God. I think that brings us to our gospel reading then, where we have Jesus, who again is the great I am, being itself come close as one of us. Jesus, when he was getting in trouble with the Pharisees, said he knew Abraham, and they're like, how do you know Abraham? Like, you're only like 30. He goes, before Abraham came to be, I am. That name that God gave, people weren't allowed to say it. So that name I am had not been spoken in 1,500 years. From the time that God gave it to Moses at the burning bush to Jesus of Nazareth spoke that in reference to himself, which is either completely crazy or it's true. That's what ended up getting him crucified. It's not because he was some revolutionary rebel who upset the social order. It's because he said, I am. He says, I'm God. Obviously completely scandalous. That's what put him on the cross. But the God who's infinite and transcendent, drawing close to be with his people, has come to bring deliverance and fulfill God's promises once and for all, the new and eternal covenant. And in this parable Jesus gives, he himself is the gardener in this parable. It's kind of interesting because when he rises on Easter morning and appears to Mary Magdalene, right, she thinks he's the gardener. And what is part of God's creation? He made a garden, the Garden of Eden, this place where everything was all in right order. And then after the fall, the ultimate plan of God was to get things back in order. So we have Jesus giving a parable of him as this gardener who's come to put things back in order. He talks about this fig tree, of course, that's not bearing fruit. The fig tree is really the people. They're not bearing the fruit that they were meant to have. Of course, what are the fruit that we're meant to bear in our life? It's the fruits of the Holy Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, generosity, self-control. And maybe we feel like, I don't know if that's always the fruit that I'm bearing, which is why we need Jesus in our lives. And we see that he wants to work with us. He's like, don't cut down the tree yet. Like, I'll take care of it. I'll cultivate it. I'll fertilize it. His grace is abundant for us in our lives. And he wanted to do everything that we could to get back in this fruit of a lived relationship with God, even giving up of his own life. We have to embrace that. We have to receive that grace and continue to let Jesus transform us in our lives. It's part of the whole message of Lent, remembering who God is, and then that turning our minds and hearts back to him who made us for a life that lasts forever, who made us to bear fruit even here on earth. Of course, in the Mass, we encounter this great I am again, who again draws close, giving himself to us as our spiritual food and drink. As we encounter Christ here in the Mass today, let us be open to receive his presence, his transforming presence in a new way, to continue us on the way of faith, hope, and love. Part of the parable, too, kind of sobering, says even though God's love and mercy is infinite, our time on earth is finite. So as we heard on Ash Wednesday, now is the very acceptable time. Now is the day of our salvation.